broadcaster and political journalist Katrina Stewart and deputy political editor of The Sun, Ryan Sabey. So very good morning to both of you. Nice to see you both. We're going to kick off with the front page of The Times because once again the attack on the Manchester synagogue on Thursday morning is dominating the papers. The Times takes the angle, as well as picturing the victims, we should say, they have prominence there on that front page, but their main headline focuses on the protests that are planned for today and the Prime Minister, amongst others, calling for people not to turn up.
That's right. We're expecting maybe a few thousand people to take part in protests in central London, and the Prime Minister has got a stern warning for those people, telling them to, his quotes here, to recognise and respect the grief of Jews. And he's trying to sort of crack down on that sort of rise of anti-Semitic hate. And we've got the Home Secretary as well. She's saying that these acts that could take place today, or the marches, are un-British, a disgraceful and incendiary act. So there's a real push from politicians to actually say, we probably need to calm tensions, we need to recognise what's happened this week. Now, the trouble is that you've got the right to protest and the right to march and the right to demonstrate being married alongside what's happened this week. So the politicians are saying, more in terms of decency this week, that perhaps they should think twice about actually protesting this weekend.
And some of the protesters would say we have every sympathy for the families of the victims of the Manchester attack. We can see that that's an appalling atrocity. What we're protesting about is something totally separate, and the suffering of people in Gaza. And the march today in London, I think, is about against the prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist group. They would say we're able to separate those things out in our minds, and we should be allowed to protest. I mean, they are allowed to protest, but we shouldn't be condemned for that. I mean, what do you make of this argument that's going on?
I think that for Sir Keir Starmer, this is a difficult situation because he is trying to show leadership on this issue, but it is one of these issues where he will not be able to satisfy everybody. What is being called for is compassion. And the people who are coming out to the marches, who we saw on Thursday night were demonstrating in train stations around the UK as well on the same day that this happened, are saying that we don't lack compassion, but we have compassion for the people in Gaza, and that these protests cannot be let up while there are still questions around the situation and how that progresses, although obviously there has been movement there this week. And I think for Jewish people living in the UK, the rising tide of anti-Semitism has been incredibly difficult, and they just need a few days of break, of leeway, and that's not going to happen. So it's a very, very intense situation. It remains to be seen how Keir Starmer is going to navigate his way through this as well.
Yeah, the chief rabbi, one of those who is saying that there's too much anti-Semitic sentiment at many of these marches, and that's not fair on the Jewish community, which is grieving. What can the government do about this? Because you need an act of parliament, don't you, to ban a march? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the key points, actually, Lord Wolney, he was used to be the advisor to the government on political violence, and he's actually saying that if there are circumstances where police resources need to be earmarked elsewhere, the government should actually have the powers to ban these protests. Now, it seems like we're a long way from that, and I think that's a big step for a government to actually take. But I think you had police chiefs out yesterday. I think Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Metropolitan Police in London, said that as well, that they respect the right to protest, but if resources are being taken away from synagogues this weekend, over the last few days, is that particularly right? So there's anger, particularly at a time when police resources are actually stretched. Indeed,
and we'll be watching to see, what kind of presence there is at those marches and protests today, when they're planned later on. Let's turn to the front page of The Guardian, though, Katrina, because their focus is on the attacker on Thursday morning. A synagogue terrorist was on bail for alleged rape, is their headline.
Yes, and we see across the front pages today there is a focus on the victims. There is a focus on the rabbi who was at the scene and who showed real leadership, and he's been called a hero.
Yeah, but real tributes for the bravery of those people involved.
Absolutely, yeah. And that is balanced also by, I think, the natural need and push from people to know exactly who Jihad al-Shami was. So The Guardian has had a look at his background and has found that he was on bail for alleged sexual assault. He was on bail for rape. It's understood that he's had other criminal convictions as well, but he wasn't on any kind of terrorist watch lists. So they've been taking a look at him, trying to work out who he is, what his motivations are, and obviously that will become more clear in the coming days.
Indeed, and it is interesting, isn't it, that we are seeing the pictures of the victims on the front pages and not the attacker. There's sense that they're the ones that we should be remembering here.
Yeah, totally. I think yesterday, on Friday, that there was more of that. But I think today, the stories of bravery and how people at the synagogue actually locked other people in the congregation there inside to actually make sure that the attacker couldn't actually get to more people. So I think ultimately, long term, that we'll be remembering the victims in this and the heroes in this as well.
Indeed. A lot of coverage, once again, on that story, and its impact is going to be felt for a long time. But let's turn to a different issue. Ryan, inside the Daily Mail, you've picked out the article that focuses on head of the Tory party conference, their leader, Kemi Badenoch, saying that the party is going to take the country out of the ECHR were they to be in government. That's
right. It seems like this policy has been a long time coming, actually. Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, launched a big review of this policy several months ago. And she says, finally, it's the time where she will say that if the Conservative Party get into government, they will leave Strasbourg and the Strasbourg rules, because she believes it's the only way, as it says here, to deport foreign criminals and illegal immigrants to their homelands or third countries such as Rwanda. So what the Conservative Party are saying, that this is the only way how you can try and crack down on that sort of small boats issue, crack down illegal migration in terms of deporting people. And Kemi Badenoch here, writing in the Mail, says that she looked at the issue of the grooming gang scandal over recent months or years, and the failure to actually deport people regarding that was the tipping point for her to actually make this decision. Now, politically, it's interesting that she's made this. Reform and Nigel Farage actually said it was time to leave the European Convention of Human Rights best part of a decade ago. So in some ways that actually she's playing catch-up, and she's also had to navigate the issue of Northern Ireland because of obviously the European Convention of Human Rights, so integral to the Good Friday Agreement. So, but she seems to think, on balance, that they can leave the European Convention of Human Rights, and it won't make too much difference to that. What
do you make of this? That means that Reform and the Tories have a similar line on this. Labour is saying it's even going to look at the European Convention on Human Rights and see whether elements of it can be adapted potentially. What do you make of how the parties are moving?
I mean, this isn't a new conversation. As you say, it's been on the table for discussion for the past 10 years, but not quite so seriously as now. And really, the small boats crisis has pushed that forward. Nigel Farage has really led the discussion on this, and it does feel like Kemi Badenoch is trotting to catch up with him. It would be an unusual move. We would be the first country to leave the ECHR, other than Russia and Greece briefly when it was under military junta. So that's quite interesting company to want to keep. And of course, one of the issues here is there's talk that leaving the ECHR would help with things like NHS waiting lists. Well, is this just a sop for not fixing the actual bread and butter issues that are problematic in the country? I think that it's quite a distraction, but this sort of straight talking perhaps will play to the kind of voters that would go for Reform UK and might be useful to the Conservatives, but it doesn't feel like Kemi Badenoch is charting her own course. It feels like she is just trying to scoop up Reform UK potential voters and is following behind Nigel Farage.
Well, yes, I mean, that could be the perception, couldn't it, Ryan? Do you think that there is a worry amongst some of the Tory supporters that the party is moving too much in Reform's wake? Yeah, I think the trouble is for Kemi Badenoch, and probably for Sir Keir Starmer as well, she's chasing the Reform vote, but a big part of that Conservative support over generations has been that sort of centre-right, the sort of One Nation Conservatives. So the fact that she moves towards the right, where do those people go? And it's interesting as well that the government
are not going to go as far as saying they're going to leave the European Convention of Human Rights, but they are going to look at, some people may say tinkering around the edges. They're looking at big reviews of Article 8, the right to family life. So when people use that as a legal sort of defence to stay in this country, so that is one avenue that they're looking at actually to come up with new guidance. So judges can apply it differently and maybe actually be stricter when it comes to making those judgments. So you've got Reform and Conservatives on one side going the full hog, but then you've got the government saying, look, we think we can do it just by telling judges where they need to go.
How to apply it differently. Yeah, interesting to see where that goes, certainly as far as the government is concerned. Let's move on to the Financial Times now. Katrina, you've picked out a piece about luxury apartments. Who's buying them?
Well, I also want to register my complaint with the Financial Times because the headline tells me I'm about to find out about US billionaires and their pets, which is what I'm interested in. But there are no mention anywhere of any pets. So it's a bit of a letdown, this story, in some regards. But apparently...
We want to know about the dogs.
We do. We want to know about the dogs. Cats, hamsters, perhaps, or billionaires into gerbils. So apparently American tycoons are buying up property across London in hitherto unforeseen numbers. And it's partly because of the issues in the US, the number of US citizens who are trying to get UK citizenship and flee Donald Trump's presidency. So the Blackstone boss, Citadel hedge fund founder and the founder of WhatsApp have bought homes in Belgravia. And these are apparently the most expensive properties in London. There's a 25-metre indoor swimming pool with a sculptural ceiling inspired by an ice cave, whatever that looks like.
You see, you may not have dogs, but you've got ice caves.
Well,
so you've
indeed.
got some good detail in there.
There is some nice detail there. But the interesting bit, of course, is that...
Very quickly.
US buyers are becoming the most important demographic in London, so quite a shift.
Very interesting. We are out of time, but you'll be back next hour. Thank you.
We arrive.